Okay, looking at the problem set, question number 1, we're going to mark the endpoints of 0 and 1. Those are our whole numbers. And then it says to show 1/2. My denominator downstairs is 2. I know that because I have 2 equal parts to my number line. And then I'm going to mark my fractions 0/2, 1/2, and 2/2. Now the next direction says draw one vertical line down the middle of each rectangle, creating 2 parts, and shade the left half of each. Now don't worry about getting it exactly straight. The shading in 5th grade needs to be done with diagonal lines like I'm doing now. And once I have those shaded, did we go ahead and write the problems below yesterday, boys and girls?
Yes.
Okay, so I will go ahead and just review how we did that. Now, you know, the more often I do this, the more times I do this, the better I get at explaining it. So I know more than I did yesterday, so listen carefully, okay? If I am going to continue this horizontal line pattern, I'll start with 2 rows on my first rectangle, 3 rows on my second rectangle. How many rows on my third?
3.
4 rows, just 3 lines. There's a difference. Pay attention to the rows, okay? And on the last one, I'm going to have 5 rows. All right, now here's how we make equivalent fractions in 5th grade. Starting tomorrow, you're actually going to do this on a sprint. So this is the only day for the visuals, okay? So I'm going to do 1/2 equals 1/2 times, and then I'm going to count the number of rows in each half, and that is 3. So I'm going to multiply 1/2 times 3. This does not mean 3/3, because 3/3 would be 1, right?
Yeah.
Now you're going to have to quit messing around behind my back. All right, so now that I have 1/2 times 3, I can multiply straight across to get 3/6. That's my answer to the equivalent fraction for 1/2, okay? Moving across, 1/2 equals 1/2 times, how many rows do I have here? Just tell me.
3.
I have 3 lines. How many rows do I have? 4 rows. So I'll do 1/2 times 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 4 is, so 4/8 is also equivalent to 1/2, okay? Look at the next one, and I'm going to ask you to answer me. On this one, I'm doing 1/2 times the number of rows. How many rows do you see?
5.
So it's 1/2 times 5. Can you stop messing? Thank you. 5 times 1 is 5. 2 times 5 is 10. So 5/10 is also equivalent to 1/2. Okay, that's pretty much how you do it when you're showing how. For paper 2, now it says to use your folded paper strips, but when I held up my 1/3 to this number line, it didn't really help me much. So we're just going to eyeball this. To show thirds on this number line, I'm going to start by marking my endpoints of 0 and 1. Now I need 3 equal parts between 0 and 1, so that means 2 tick marks. How many equal parts do I have, class?
3.
3. So that's my denominator downstairs, remember? Okay, so write your denominator. And then you can go back and write your fractions. Now be very careful. Someone in block 1 accidentally started with a 1 here at the 0. I have 0/3 right now. And 1/3 goes here. So go ahead and label your fractions all the way up to 3/3. And remember, 3/3 is equivalent to 1. Whenever you have a fraction on top of itself, a number on top of itself, it's just like 3 divided by 3. Okay, so how many equal vertical sections do you think I need in these rectangles now? 3? 3, I'm going to say these are columns, okay? But Griffin, you're right, there's 2 lines that you draw. So the lines are always 1 less than the number of spaces. You remember that from 3rd and 4th grade?
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to shade the far left. Does anybody have a pencil that Ethan could borrow? Did you get it, Ethan? Because you really need to get over here and start writing, so you don't get far behind. Rayleigh's got one for you if you need it, okay? All right, so I've shaded the far left section of each rectangle. Ethan, why don't you wait on the number line and just get your rectangles ready to go, okay? Rayleigh, can he use yours? Thank you. Okay, if you're not done shading, you're going to have to figure out a way to shade a little faster. Ethan's the only one with the excuse. Okay, now it says to follow the same pattern as in problem 1. So we'll do 1 horizontal line, and that gives us 2 rows. Then we'll do 2 horizontal lines, which gives us how many rows? 3. 3 lines gives us 4 rows. And 4 lines gives us 5 rows. And those rows are very important because they tell us what to multiply by, okay? So I'm going to move this down just a little bit. That's too far. And I'm going to start with 1/3. We're making fractions equivalent to 1/3. So 1/3 times what, Jorge? Count your rows. 2. 1/3 times 2 on this one. Good. And then you multiply straight across. 1 times 2 is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. And that's my answer. Okay? All right. Going on to the next one. 1/3 times Sebastian. 1/3 times how many rows here? 3 rows. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 3 is
9.
So 3/9 is equivalent to 1/3. How can I check this? Can I just count my boxes here?
Yeah.
I can. And if I have 3 out of 9 that are shaded, I know I did it right. Okay? All right, the next one. 1/3 equals Abrielle, how many rows in this one?
4.
4. So 1/3 times 4 equals what, boys and girls?
4/12.
4/12. And do I have 4 out of 12 shaded?
Yes.
Okay. Are you kind of getting the hang of this now?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, let's do 1/3 again. And how many rows do I have, Channing?
5.
So 1/3 times 5 equals 5/15. Okay, good. Now we're going to kick it up a notch. All right, question 3. It says continue the pattern with 3/4. Okay, so on your number line, you will still have 0 and 1 for your end points. And it says 3/4. So how many tick marks do I need?
3. 4. Yeah, 3.
3. Now remember, the number of tick marks is usually 1 less than the number of spaces. So let's count the spaces. 1, 2, 3, 3, 4. So I got it. My denominator,
4.
good, downstairs. And don't forget to start with 0/4 when you start your fractions. Now it says to show 3/4. So what I'm going to do is draw an arrow to 3/4 on my number line. Okay? What's my denominator?
4.
So I will have 4 columns, which is 3 lines in each, and it's 3 vertical lines, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Now starting tomorrow, you will be doing this multiplying of fractions in your head to find equivalent
Yes.
fractions, okay? Now how many do you think I shade?
3.
You're right, it's 3. So these are not unit fractions, are they? No. Unit fractions start with a 1, or they have 1 for a numerator, I mean. Now, I know that this is not the method of shading that you prefer, but it's just how we have to do it for right now.
I'm terrible at shading.
And it's okay. If you look at mine, it's not beautiful.
Your boards.
And I really don't like it when it's not perfect, do I? I know. Okay, so we're making fractions equivalent to 3/4 here. So once you have it shaded, go ahead and write 3/4 underneath the first one. Now we're going to continue the pattern.
4/4.
So the pattern was 1 horizontal line to make 2 rows. 2 horizontal lines. How many rows does it make?
3.
3 horizontal lines. 4 rows. 4 horizontal lines.
5.
Makes 5 rows. Now, the only thing different here is you're going to take 3/4 times the number of rows. Yes. So instead of writing like 1/3 or 1/4, this is going to be 3/4 times. How many rows do I have, Lily?
2.
So 3/4 times 2. And that will be, if I multiply straight across, 6/8. And I'm circling it to help the teacher find the answers easier. Okay. The next one. I'm going to take 3/4 times
3.
what, Ethan? Times what number? Well, it's actually,
3/3.
it's really not 3/3. Ethan wasn't here when I explained that. If it were 3/3, so I'm kind of glad you said that, then that would be 3/4 times 1. This is actually 3/4 times the number 3. I could also write it like this, 3/4 times 3. Okay? So it doesn't really mean 3/3. I want you to make sure you know the difference between 3 and 3/3. Okay, so 3 times 3 is, and Ethan says the answer is 9/12. Okay? All right. So this one. 3/4 times, Christian, 3/4 times what? How many rows? 4. So 3/4 times 4 would be what fraction, Christian? 12/16. Okay, and I'm going to have Griffin help me with the last one, since he's raising his hand over there. So 3/4 times what, Griffin?
5.
Well, actually, just times 5, right?
It goes 15/20.
Good. Okay. Okay, for number 4, it says continue the process and model 2 equivalent fractions for 6/5. Because of Zern, I want to change this to 5/4 because I was watching someone Zern practice yesterday, and we had to model 5/4. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to prepare the children for that instead of what it says here, okay? So the first thing I want to do is write 5/4 as a fraction. Because now, what you learned in first grade about the big one isn't going to work on the bottom, is it? So, this is called an improper fraction. What it means is it's more than 1.
So it's like 1.
How much would 1 be if 4 is my denominator?
4.
For what?
4.
4/4. So I'm going to put 1 hole in the middle of this number line, and that's 4/4. Now how do I know 4 is my denominator? Tells me right up here. Okay? So this end mark will be 0 still. And what whole number comes after 1?
2.
Okay. So now that I have my whole numbers on the number line, and in 5th grade, I don't know if you remember this, but your whole numbers have to be on top of the number line.
Yep.
You can't write them below, okay? Now I will go ahead and write, before I write my denominator, I need 4 equal sections between each whole number. So it will be 3 tick marks. Then I can go and write my denominator. Now things get a little confusing when we go past the number 1. Remember, start with 0 when you're labeling. And double check your number line with mine before we go on. Okay, now what am I going to model?
5/4.
5/4. So instead of drawing an arrow because I have words up there, I'm just going to circle 5/4, okay? Now each rectangle is actually 1 hole. So each hole has to be divided into 4 equal sections. So let's just work with these 2 rectangles first. So I've got my denominator, it's 4. How many do I need to shade?
3 of them.
No.
I mean all of them. And then 1 more on the
Okay, so 4 plus 1 is 4 plus 1 more 5.
Yes.
Okay, so this is what it looks like to shade 5/4. Yeah, Zern had it on there too, and I really like the way they have you do it. Okay, so same pattern. We're going to start with 1 horizontal line. Now, by the way, if I were to take this as a whole and a fraction, it would have been 1 and 1/4, right?
Yes. Yes.
But we're not working with mixed numbers right now. We're working with improper fractions. So 5/4 times what number?
2.
How do you know it's 2?
Because there's 2 rows.
Because there's 2 rows. So a fraction that's equivalent to 5/4 would be 10/8. Okay? All right, we'll do the same thing with the next 2. So my denominator's 4. Each whole has to be divided into 4 equal parts. My numerator is 5. So I will shade 5 of those parts. Continuing with the same pattern as the front of the page.
You shade so fast.
somebody in one of the other blocks said, I'd really like a ruler. This is bothering me. And I said, we'll be here all day if I gave you a ruler. So we're just going to have to be okay with it not being perfect, aren't we? Okay, so 5/4 times what number, class?
3.
The number of rows we made, so it's 3, equals 15/12. Okay, real quick, I'm going to give you directions for your